City of Calgary gets Alberta's first recall petition for Jyoti Gondek to resign from her job as mayor of Calgary. What does this mean, and what does it mean for my run for mayor of the city? Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. Boy, my online timeline, my history on Twitter has been blowing up over the last few hours as people are mentioning this new online petition or this new recall notice being sent out. I shouldn't call it a petition. It's more of a recall notice being put in place to recall failed woke mayor Jyoti Gondek in the city of Calgary. Now, this has been up for debate for quite some time, and it was something that I didn't think would come this way because this is Alberta's first official recall since the UCP put this into effect. And, well, it's no surprise that it goes against Jyoti Gondek before anybody else. But I wanted to touch base on why this is good and possibly bad for certainly my future running for the mayor's seat in Calgary. We'll go through the article first, then I'm going to talk about the challenges and hurdles that this faces for candidates like myself that are going to run in this race. But here we go. The Calgary gets Alberta's first recall petition against Gondek. The city of Calgary on Monday received a formal petition to recall Mayor Jyoti Gondek and Alberta's recall legislation. It's the first since the UCP government introduced the recall provisions back in 2022. Quoted, "This is the first notice of recall petition that has been received by the city clerk's office since legislation took effect. The petition was filed by resident Landon Johnson, a Calgary HVAC company owner, on January 30th under the Municipal Government Act with no other details apart from an email address. The Western Standard has reached out for comment. Now that it is certified to be legitimate, a 60-day signature collection period is in effect and will end on April the 4th. The petition must be received by the city clerk's office on or before the 60-day signature collection period ends and to be considered valid. Gondek has faced withering criticism over taxes, her refusal to attend Hanukkah ceremony in December over the war in the Middle East, and most recently, Calgary's single-use napkin bylaw that went into effect last week. Now, we've talked about that to great extent. I would also add part of the problem, too, that I think a lot of people might be mad at is when you look at the rallies of a few hundred people standing outside City Hall this past weekend screaming about Premier Danielle Smith's latest changes to children under the age of 17 receiving reconstructive genital surgery or body mutilation surgery and taking puberty blockers. Of course, Danielle Smith has put a cap on those things, that you're not to do those things until you're an adult. And of course, the uprising with former failed mayor Naheed Nenshi took place at Calgary City Hall. But what's most important, and while I will never argue that people aren't allowed to protest, if everybody remembers Jyoti Gondek's new bylaw that came into effect, well, if you're protesting on the other side of the fence, it can actually be met with fines. You can actually be told you're not allowed to protest against Drag Time Story Hour. You're not allowed to protest against the trans community. It's hate speech. And, if you protest under any circumstances that the city finds offensive, well, they'll just silence you, which, again, it's a bit of a double standard when it comes to how the city is run and why Jyoti Gondek, I agree, absolutely needs to go. Since she was elected in October of 2021, Gondek's approval ratings have been in a free fall. According to ThinkHQ poll in December of 2023, her approval rating stood at 30% with 61% disapproval, the lowest approval rating for a mayor in Calgary's history. Well, that's what happens when you have an installed mayor. The people didn't ask for this. 175,000 votes determined this installed mayor to be put in office. This is what's going to happen. This isn't what the people asked for. Recall legislation was formally introduced by former Premier Jason Kenney in 2020 and came into effect on April 7th of 2022. Calgarians hoping to oust Jyoti Gondek might want to hold their collective breaths in an almost impossibly high bar to meet. The petition is considered sufficient if it includes signatures from a minimum of 40% of the population who are eligible to vote for the elected official named in the notice of recall. That means a total of 514,284 signatures out of 1.2 million people registered to vote in the last election will be required to pass this petition. In addition, they have to be physically signed and verified. Now, a lot of people are complaining about that, but I think that's great. You have to sign in person and you have to show your identification. We don't want mail-in ballots or anything like that because that's what's going to screw with the system. By comparison, only 393,000 voted in the 2021 election. So again, only about a quarter of eligible voters voted in the last city election, or about 46%. How is that 46%? It says here 1.2 million people, and we're just under four. I guess 1/3. Sorry, I shouldn't have said 1/4. I was rounding it down to 300,000. 1/3 of the people. Gondek received 176,344 of those votes. All signatures must be original signatures, and a recall petition may not be signed in digital form. If a petition is successful, there's a further 45-day assessment period. The city clerk must then, at the first council meeting after determining whether the recall petition is sufficient or insufficient, make a declaration to the council as to whether the recall petition is sufficient or insufficient. According to the city website, if the petition is declared sufficient, the individual named in the notice of recall petition is recalled. The individual is no longer a member of council or any council committee, and the position to which the individual was elected is vacant. If there are 12 months or before the next general election, which is October 20th of 2025, and there will be a by-election, will then be called to fill the vacant seat. If a recall petition is declared insufficient, the city clerk must publish the result on the city's website. Changes aren't permitted after submission. Once a notice of petition has been filed, no further recall petitions in relation to the same council member will be accepted. So if this fails, we're stuck with Gondek until 2025. The mayor's office has declined to provide a formal comment, issuing the following statement. In October of 2021, Calgarians put their faith in me to be mayor who could bring balance and stability to the city at a time when polarized ideologies stood to divide us. No, you were installed. You weren't voted in. I remain steadfastly committed to work of the building in the future that holds opportunity and prosperity for everyone who lives here. We have work to do. Onward, says failed woke mayor Jyoti Gondek. Now, where this presents a problem for yours truly is, let's say that this petition actually goes through, that we get the 500,000 signatures required to put this through. As you see, there is a by-election held, which determines who's going to take that vacant seat. Unfortunately, for somebody like myself who wants to run for mayor, I've had a lot of people say, how do we contribute to a campaign? How do we get started on volunteering to help you do these things? The problem is, in order to run as a constituent for the mayor's chair in Calgary, you can only register as of January 1st of the election year for the nomination papers in order to run as a candidate for city council, meaning I'm not even allowed to seek nomination until technically January 1st of 2025. Now, if I was to waver and take my time getting that nomination, you can get it up until 4 months, 4 weeks prior, I believe, to the election, at which time you can get your credentials in order, you can get your name on the ballot, and you can request to get involved in the race. The biggest problem and the biggest hurdle that I'm going to have to face running for mayor of Calgary is resources, raising funds, trying to get backings, trying to get my name out there, because the many people who watch me on YouTube, and I'm very grateful for our community and viewers, but there's 1.7 million people in the city, and only a small handful of them know who I am. It would be great to get out there and have the time to build a campaign, to get the message out there, to have rallies, to get people excited about voting, because let's be honest, when you look at those voting turnout numbers for the last civic election, the biggest problem is that people are feeling their vote doesn't matter and they shouldn't be lining up to vote at the polls. My job running for the next mayor's seat is to, of course, influence people that they need to get out and vote, that their voice matters, that is the time to get rid of Jyoti Gondek. And if she is in fact recalled, I fear that's going to diminish my chances of running for mayor drastically. And again, if that does happen, it's good for the city to see her gone. Bad in the same sense when I talk about councillors, because when I mentioned, even this morning on Twitter, the outrage of what's going on over at City Hall is that currently the protests that hit with Danielle Smith's newest restrictions, we'll say, or newest rules for transgender children in the province, and the liability that parents are allowed to have with their children, or responsibility, I should say, The biggest problem, none of these city councilors are standing in support of Danielle Smith. None of them. At least none of them have made a statement. They're all fence sitters. They constantly worry about how their image is going to be. And I went through this in the last election when asking even my local councillor how they felt about having to show proof of vaccination in order to sit down at a restaurant or walk into a movie theater or get on an airplane. And of course, they played it safe until they saw restrictions ease, until they saw enough pushback from the public that they felt it was okay to say something about that. We don't need that in this city. What we need is somebody who's going to risk being offensive, somebody who's going to speak the truth, somebody who's not afraid to tell people how it is in a situation, and do what's best for its constituents. And we're not going to see that if Jyoti Gondek gets recalled. You might get somebody like Dan McLean taking the seat, or somebody else who's got their eyes on the prize. But it's going to be somebody from city council at that point, and it's not going to be an independent runner like myself who has better views for what this city needs. You're going to get more of what they say the good old boys, where your taxes are going to continue to increase, and they're just going to skim a little off the top without being as woke and as disruptive as Jyoti Gondek have been. But it's just going to be more of the same old when we see what happens in this city. But it's going to be interesting to see. Again, I'm not holding my breath, because if voter turnout has anything to say about it, you would need everybody who voted in the last election, as well as another 100,000 plus people to sign this petition in order for it to be valid. So unless by some divine miracle, the people of Calgary get together and sign this petition to remove Jyoti Gondek from office, it looks like we are in fact stuck with her until October of 2025. So good and bad, but let me know your guys' thoughts down below in the comments. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I will state that if Jyoti Gondek does get recalled, I'll be just as happy to see her go. But unfortunately, that would probably spell an end to my my interest in running in the next election, or my ability, I should say, to run in the next election, as I would be strapped for time and not have the funding or resources in order to effectively pull off such a campaign. But let me know your guys' comments down below. If it's your first time here, I hope this video has earned your subscription. Make sure as you're heading over to click that bell for notifications that you join us on Fridays for Friday Night Fringe, our new stream nights here on the channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Central, where we sit down and go down over everything that's happened this week. I'm sure we'll be discussing this in great detail on Friday, as well as other things that have happened in the country, a little bit of back and forth with the community as well, and I always look forward to seeing each and every one of you there. I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great rest of your evening. I'll catch you on the next one.